Welcome back, College Baseball Central fans. This is the weekend rotation. We are missing a few faces, a few of our older faces here. So I guess this one's going to be called the Young Gun Store. But before we jump into this, want to thank our sponsor, Home Field Apparel. Use code CBC15, get 15% off. Carry every single team. So if you want to sulk in those Ole Miss tears, Chandler, you can get a Home Field Apparel. But let's go ahead and jump right into that. We'll save the Ole Miss banter for later. Virginia, NC State. AJ, what did you kind of see in that game?
I mean, Virginia just continues to dominate. No, they're one of few teams with only one loss this year, and they just absolutely rolled NC State yesterday. That game wasn't even competitive. They lock up a series going for the sweep today. I mean, Virginia is. I think it's too late to call them a wagon because they've been rolling, but in honor of Noah, Virginia is playing like a wagon.
Yeah, and them and LSU kind of have to feel like the mid-March kind of Omaha locks because they're getting it. When your Saturday guy goes out there and throws a shutout to go up 2 games, Geloff adds a RBI double. I mean, it's just good vibes for the Virginia Cavaliers. I know that was kind of the worry with some of their easier schedule was that how would they kind of translate to ACC play? And after the first test, I mean, they're acing it with flying colors. Chandler, did you get a chance to catch that game?
No, I missed that one. It was a bit of a busy day for me yesterday, kind of sulking, but yeah, no, I missed
As
that
you
one.
said, probably conflicted with your revs. I think that as of right now, I think mid-March we have to declare Virginia, I guess, the ACC winners. Just go ahead and everybody else pack it on home. But we'll segue back into, I guess, the surprise team of the SEC. Actually, I would say both the surprise teams of the SEC, Florida and Alabama. Alabama obviously was the last undefeated SEC team. In Florida, I know that they're 5, but I was kind of ready for the Florida disrespect, and they kind of took it to Alabama. Chandler, did you get a chance to catch that one?
Yeah, I got to see the end of it, and I'm always here for the Florida disrespect, and so I was, big time rooting for Bama, which always hurts my soul. But man, that Florida team just will not go away yesterday. Bama kept coming back and taking leads, and even got it big a little bit, and Florida kept fighting back. And when they hit the solo home run to lead off the bottom of the what was that, the 10th or the ninth, I just knew it was fixing to get ugly from there, and they did. They finished it off. It looked really like a really good ball club, unfortunately.
Yeah, and more of the same. I think that even though Alabama lost, I think it showed me a lot about their team. And I know that Florida kind of came back and took a lot of those, but I think from an Alabama side standpoint, to kind of bounce back and really not get blown out. I know that's very hard to do in baseball when you give up that early lead to kind of fold the tent, but credit to the Crimson Tide there. AJ, are you ready to call Florida kind of the East champions? I know that's probably
You know,
not
I
a dig at your Gamecocks, but they looked really, really good.
I mean, they looked really good, really competitive. Battled back from an early deficit, but also kudos to Alabama to go and lose like that, and then to win game two to salvage a game in the series on the road in the SEC, especially at a team like Florida. I mean, it's hard to win on the road in the SEC. It's even harder to win the game after a doubleheader when you get walked off on. So kudos to Alabama for still fighting. I think they are playing much better than people thought they would this year. And I think going and taking one of three, salvaging a game against the Gators is a good start to SEC play for them.
Yeah, and I think that's going to go a long way as they kind of try and crawl out of that, 13, 14 range in the SEC. And another team that I think has kind of been sliding down a lot of people's boards lately, Tennessee, Missouri. Missouri came out 9-1 over Tennessee. Despite the kind of non-media hype, this was Tennessee's first loss since that opening weekend. Missouri hung 4 on Dolander early, and it was really kind of all downhill from there. AJ, what did you kind of see from your Missouri Tigers there?
I saw a team that just hits. I mean, Dolander was coming at him. He wasn't exactly missing his spots. He wasn't throwing bad pitches, but there was just, I mean, it was barrel after barrel after barrel after barrel. And, if you haven't been paying attention to Mizzou this year, they are, I think, 15-3, 16-3. That they're a very competitive ball club. Um, so watch out. This isn't your dad's Mizzou baseball team. This is a new Mizzou. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if they make a run trying to make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and all of their losses too, I think that have been either in sweep situations or on Sundays or Saturdays on the doubleheaders. So they are a really competitive team. I did get to see them in person when they played TCU, and they did a lot of the little things right. They bunted the ball really well. They moved runners up, and then when people were in scoring position, they knocked them in. And yeah, Missouri is, I think, in almost everybody's minds, the last 5 or 6 years, they've just been the pencil in 14 team at the bottom. And if you do worse than Missouri, like Mississippi State did last year, like it's just a complete and total failure. But Missouri kind of came out punching for a Tennessee team that I think a lot of people are going to be looking at to kind of take a step back. And obviously, losing to Missouri on opening night of SEC play and getting blown out is not ideal. But I think Tony V will get the boys up, and it'll be interesting to see how the Sunday game plays because I think they win today. But going forward from there, um, AJ, any other games kind of catch your eye this weekend?
Uh, looking at it, I always like just watching Campbell just rake.
Yeah.
I very much enjoy that. Um, and kind of off the beaten path. I was staying up late last night watching UC San Diego come back and walk off Long Beach State. They were down 5-2 in the ninth. They had, I think, like 3 doubles in the bottom of the ninth, and then had a broken metal bat base hit back off the pitcher, and then a bloop single to win the game.
They stole
Like
it.
it was the guy who broke his bat was literally running down the first baseline, holding the knob of his bat as his barrel went flying towards the pitcher. It's not every day you see a broken metal bat.
Did you ever have that happen when you were playing baseball back in the day?
I did not. I didn't swing hard enough.
I had a one teammate do it with the 5150, and it shattered his bat. And I don't think the umpire knew what was going on at the time because he actually called like a dead ball, and he just got a foul ball with 2 strikes. Like it was one of the weirder situations. Definitely doesn't happen that all, and especially with bat technology where it is right now, it definitely really doesn't happen. But we'll go ahead since Chandler's back. Chandler, why don't you give us the rundown of what happened to the Rebs yesterday?
Well, I mean, one of the hot points for the Rebels all year has been the fact that they can swing the bat, and there's just been a total lack of that up in Nashville. That the Vandy arms have been outstanding, both their starters, and they've been kind of able to run their starters. Obviously, won last night, going to complete game, 2-hitter, shutout inning or shutout game, and the other starter, I think on Thursday night, I think he pitched 8 1/3, something like that, or maybe 7 1/3. So they only had to use another back into their bullpen arm, which is their strength in the bullpen. And so look for another big game by Vandy pitching today. They may not have quite the starting situation, but they're also going to have, they're basically their entire bullpen handy. And Mike Bianco's been running our pitchers. We don't have as much bullpen, so he's been letting our starters go a little bit longer than they might should. They may have great starts, but, kind of taper off towards the end. So it'll be interesting to see what pitching looks like today. Ole Miss has a great arm on the mound, Xavier Rivas, but who's going to follow that up? So Reb's got to get some runs. I mean, it's really hard to win if you don't score.
Yeah, and I think that solves kind of Tim Corbin's bullpen issues is just run the starters out there the whole time. But this is going to be a very interesting game for Ole Miss because getting swept in the SEC looks really, really bad, and especially when you're playing these series like this, that third game, Sunday, Saturday game is even more important. And look for Groff and kind of the other boys to get the bats going and maybe double-digit runs from Ole Miss. AJ, you ready to write off Ole Miss as 7 of 7 in the SEC West?
No, but they need to wake up a little bit. I think this is a team that rolled through non-conference play probably with a better record than a lot of us thought. I think a lot of us thought they'd take a step back, and then first SEC test, Vandy's just kind of walked all over them. And this wasn't a Vandy team that has been known to tear the cover off the ball this season. And a run rule in the first game and a blowout in the second game. I get it's in Nashville, but that's not the most hostile environment you can play at. So
I don't know. The Whistler's pretty hostile.
well, that's what one
It's
or
a
two
different
people.
kind, though. It's a different kind of hostile.
Yeah,
And it's also important to remember at this point too that our Friday night guy was supposed to be our midweek guy too.
Mhm.
So I mean, there's a lot still to learn, and he's been great through 3 or 4 innings, first, second time through the lineup. But a guy like that who has B plus, A minus stuff, isn't going to work a third time through the lineup, and we've been letting him run out that way, and that's kind of what happened on Thursday. So it'll be interesting to see. Getting Hunter Elliott back next month will definitely be a way to turn things around, but you got to do it before that. You can't lose every series between now and then. So
Yeah,
definitely got to start winning some ball games.
Even if Ole Miss loses this next game 9-7, I'd take that as a positive
Yeah.
sign. You just can't put up 0 runs or 2 runs again. You got to throw a crooked number up there at least once. Show me that offense is adjusting and building momentum.
And especially too, another thing is if Ole Miss isn't going to be able to hit these Vandy guys, I mean, it's just given scouting material for all the teams and almost the blueprint on how to beat Ole Miss. I do know that they have injuries with Hunter Elliott, but again, every team has injuries. Vandy isn't getting half a point for beating Ole Miss without their Friday starter. That game still matters. We'll kind of run through some quick ones here. We go to the next segment. Florida State 19-8 over Boston College. Liberty won 9-7 over Florida Gulf Coast. Southern Miss 4-2 over Texas State. We'll gloss over that one. Virginia Tech lost 4-3 to Miami at home. Texas Tech, Oklahoma State. Tech won in extras 8-7.
Did you catch the end of that game?
It was a crazy game, yeah. And those two might be the two, I would say, my favorite teams to watch in the Big 12 because they both just seem like trashy, chip on your shoulder type fan bases. And their baseball teams always kind of reflect that too as well. Obviously with Riggio and then the way Tadlock kind of coaches as well. But what did you kind of see from that game from Texas Tech? I know they obviously pulled out the win. Definitely had a chip on their shoulder with D1 not ranking them.
I mean, they were down 7-1 in the 8th inning, and they come back and win, given it was on a dropped fly ball or misplayed fly ball in left field. But, I mean, Texas Tech, they're hard to beat at home. Oklahoma State hasn't beaten Texas Tech in a series at Texas Tech since 2017. And this has been a good competitive Oklahoma State squad. And so, I mean, it was battling back. It's easy to, roll over in game 1 of the series when you're down 6, being like, all right, okay, we'll just come back and get him tomorrow. And Texas Tech just refused to roll over. They just battled back. And I think Oklahoma State thought they had it locked up, and then they look up and it's 7-7 again.
It kind of reminded me of when, I forget who Oklahoma State played on Sunday in Dallas where their pitchers just couldn't seem to get anybody out. That's really what it kind of reminded me of because I wouldn't say Tech like banged the ball around the yard like when you watch them. They almost kind of just singled them to death, and kind of credit to Texas Tech on that aspect. And then I think I've mentioned it on a few shows, but I think Gavin Cash might be the most underrated hitter in the country, and I think he might be the most underrated hitter on Texas Tech because he's batting .463 out of the 7-hole, and he's been dancing around that 500 mark all season. But I think it'll be interesting to see how Oklahoma State responds. This is a series that's going to go a long way in the Big 12 because of how the Big 12 set up. You really don't get to play that many of these good teams, and the bad teams really don't beat up. Like Baylor isn't going to steal a series from Texas Tech. So when you get these good matchups, you really have to go in and kind of handle business. But again, Texas Tech is a very, very tough place to play. And then and from there to another tough place to play that didn't really play like it, LSU with probably one of the more complete games I've seen in the SEC, beating A&M 9-0. Paul Skeens was just about unhittable for the Aggie Bats. He had all 3 of his pitches working, high 90s fastball, low 80s curveball, and his slider was getting a ton of swing and miss. Just some notes on Paul Skeens: 6 1/3, 4 hits, no walks, 11 strikeouts, 106 pitches. Just kind of on a personal note, since I follow A&M, they were a team that definitely walks more than they strike out. So Skeens to roll in there and get 11 strikeouts, no walks. And then the LSU Bats singled A&M to death, 4-0 after the first 2 innings, and they kind of went silent. And then 5 in the 9th to really put it away. But are we ready to say that LSU is ready for the hype, AJ?
I think so. I mean, there's no one who I wouldn't want to play more in a 1-game series than LSU, because if you can throw Paul Skeens out there, good luck. There are some questions as to how, they're going to organize the Saturday and Sunday starters, but that's not because they don't have guys. That's because they have so many guys who can step up and throw that it's okay, which one do we want to put here? Which one do we want to put, in our late game situation? And I think it's hard to pick a more complete team right now than LSU.
Yeah, and they go about 10 deep too with the bats as well. I mean, Jordan Thompson in the 9-hole is probably the best 9-hole hitter in the country. They've moved Trey Morgan around. And I think the other thing too that really surprises me about this LSU team as I've kind of watched them is their versatility. Trey Morgan can play first or he can play in the outfield. They move him around. Jared Jones as well. Tommy White. It seems like a lot of these guys are bat first. And it was almost annoying to see a team that had this much power just go out and single A&M to death. And the Saturday one will be, I think, the real test of LSU because Wansing's throwing for A&M and he's the lefty. And that's always been LSU's Achilles heel. I think that their only loss they faced Iowa was lefty out of the bullpen. So, but again, with their pitching, I don't even think they won 9-0 and they didn't need 9 runs. Like even when they were up 4, it didn't really feel like it was that competitive of a game.
Yeah, I mean, credit to A&M for keeping it to 4-0 for that long. That's hats off to that pitching staff, and then kind of gets away from you late. So it was a closer game, I think, than the score indicated. But like you said, 4-0 felt like 6-0. Like
Yeah.
you just couldn't get anything going against Paul Skeens.
And he was working quick too. I know he threw 100 pitches, but there were a lot of at bats where he'd throw the first pitch fastball, they would watch it. He'd break off a slide piece and they'd swing and miss. And he was doing a great job. And for as good of a pitcher as Paul Skeens is, if he's working 3 or 4 of his pitches, I was even surprised that A&M had 4 hits off of Paul Skeens. That's how good he was pitching when I was watching.
Yeah, he was pitching like someone who had shut out Ole Miss for an entire game.
Yeah, or Texas. He gave Texas fits. All right, we'll jump into the next segment. Chandler, what was the coolest thing you either saw this week or from yesterday?
I think, I was just looking at this. I think one of the cooler things about so far this weekend, and, we're only really 1.5 nights in, is that there's been a lot of walk-offs. And I think we can all agree that walk-offs are a lot of fun. Texas Tech, Florida, Kentucky on a walk-off, hit by a pitch. I think there was a couple others too, but it's been a lot of walk-offs, and walk-offs are just, they make the game more fun. It gives you something to really, even if you don't have a vested interest in the game, it gives you something to root for. A complete game, 2-hitter shutout win. That's always super cool. If you're into pitching.
Are you a big pitching guy, Chandler? Or are you more of a bats guy? Or do we lose Chandler? All right, I think we made a lost Chandler there. But I'll go into the cool thing that I saw. Brown baseball against Bryant. Very under the radar. They had the first female get an at bat, Olivia Picardo. She rolled over to first base and got out, but first time in D1 baseball that they've had a female taken at bat. So that was kind of another cool thing that I saw. And then the demise of Boston College. I know that they were kind of the trendy pick after they beat Virginia Tech, but it was honestly refreshing to go out there and watch them get their ass kicked. There's very few things in the world that I can rely on in Boston College baseball to get their butts kicked by Southern teams, which usually something I could count on. So it was kind of great to see them back into it. Then AJ, what was the coolest thing you saw?
So I'm going to take a slight audible. I'm going to pick possibly the player who I think is proven himself the most this year. And if you had to take a guess who was leading the Florida Gators in batting average and RBIs and hits, who would you guess?
I'm going to butcher his name, but Jackie Bombs.
Chandler, who would you guess?
Right now or preseason?
Right now.
I would definitely think Caglione would be the.
Nope, it is Josh Rivera. He's hitting .418, 35 RBIs, 33 hits.
Jeez.
Cags is hitting .356, 31 hits, 30 RBIs. But this was a guy whose career high in home runs was 10. He's already hit 10 this year. He has been a linchpin, especially when you lose a guy like Wyatt Langford. You need other people to step up. And he has been that dude for Florida. He's the one who had the walk-off, little dribbler.
I'd rather that than a clock off, to be fair.
Yeah, I would rather that too. But he also had a home run in the game. So he's been everything Florida needs out of that shortstop position. And the talent's been there. That's never been a question. I've kind of pat myself on the back for my little pregame scouting thing. I said, or preseason scouting, I said, if Colby Halter and Josh Rivera can step up, Florida has no ceiling. And Josh Rivera is playing out of his mind right now.
Another quick note on the batting average, because I was checking this out yesterday when I was trying to see where Dylan Cruz ranked for my A&M write-up. Do you know Georgia has 2 of the top 4 hitters in the country, like out of nowhere? And I don't think we mentioned Georgia once on this show. But AJ, this is kind of great segue into SEC play. How many SEC teams could we see get into the 64 bracket? Missouri, Auburn, and obviously Alabama are the 3 of the teams that we thought were going to be out. They're playing really good preseason. How many SEC teams do you think we see?
Well, I kind of look at it and I'm like, okay, how many teams are good enough? And I probably say 13 of the 14 are good enough. I don't think Kentucky is playing like a team that can make the NCAA tournament. But then it's hard to miss the SEC tournament and make the NCAA tournament. So I think the answer is 12. But those 12 teams, really, some team is going to be left out of that tournament and would be a team you would throw in the tournament and they would give people fits. So I'm going to go 12 as the final number. But as of teams that can make it, I would say everybody except Kentucky.
Chandler, what's your number for SEC teams that make the tournament?
Yeah, no, I definitely think there are 13 teams talented enough to make the tournament. And I also agree that if you miss the SEC tournament, you're probably out. But I mean, there's so much talent around the country this year. I'm almost leaning under, and I'm a SEC homer. I'm almost thinking like 10. I mean, I know, Kentucky more or less rules themselves out if they can't win some games, which, winning last night's a good start for them. I don't think Missouri is going to continue on the track they're on. And then I think one Mississippi team's going to miss, whether it's Ole Miss take a nosedive and have a, state 22 type season, or if State keeps having pitching issues and can't find a way into the bracket. So, yeah, I'm gonna go 10. I'm gonna go low.
I was going to go 10 as well. My 4 were going to be Kentucky, Mississippi State, Georgia, and Auburn. I think that there's so many top-heavy teams in the SEC West that if Auburn played in like the pack, I think they would be one of the better teams. But I could see LSU running away with it. I could see Arkansas being really, really good as well. And then obviously, I'm an Aggie homer, so I could see them being really good. But I think it's going to be really, really tough for Auburn this year to go in and look and say, okay, on paper, I think we match up really well against this team just because the SEC is so top end. Chandler, I know Noah's kind of the big wagon guy, but there been any teams outside of Ole Miss that you kind of jumped on and said, really like watching this team?
Well, I've been watching a lot of Oklahoma State this year, and I mean, obviously, they're not really a wagon, being as they are, a top 10, top 15 team this year. Obviously, the walk off last night didn't help, but they've been a ton of fun to watch. Obviously, Campbell and Georgia Tech, both the way they hit the ball are super fun to watch. And Campbell, it almost feels like this, and they're not really a wagon anymore because we've been on them for so many years now. Ever since they went to Starkville that year, they've been a ton of fun to watch. So, and Georgia Tech being able to hit the ball on anybody. I mean, running Louisville deep into the night last night. There's a couple, especially out here in the eastern part of the country. There's a lot of fun teams to watch.
AJ, you got any new wagons for me?
New wagons? I don't think so. I mean, preseason, I was big on Louisville. I was big on Campbell. Wofford, I'll pull that one out. Wofford has been playing exceptional baseball. Coach Interdonato just continues to win up there. They're the kind of team that can give you some trouble. And then, I'll bring back Cal State Fullerton. They got their first, they opened Big West play with a win last night. They demolished the UC Irvine. So I'd love it for them to be back. I wouldn't call them a wagon yet, but they're on wagon watch.
My new wagon is going to be UTSA. I think that they have been the most complete team in Texas, and a lot of people are saying that they're the number 1 team in Texas. 16-3. I wouldn't say they got snubbed in the NCAA tournament, but they were right on the fringe, I think, with the last month to go and ended up not making it. I don't think they're going to leave it up to any chance. And I think that the one thing, too, that they're trying to show is that they're a little bit better than the Conference USA as they try and get into some of these better Texas conferences. But UTSA is my new wagon. And then obviously you said Fullerton. They've been my new wagon ever since they beat Texas. Been keeping an eye on them. AJ, I'll kind of refrain from this question. Who do you think has more wins at the end of the season, A&M or South Carolina? Because I feel like they're two
South
very
Carolina.
similar teams. You think so, South Carolina? Do you think it'll be close, or do you think South Carolina will?
I could see this getting away from A&M early because of that schedule. To where if they struggle through the first 3 series, I could see the wheels coming off. Meanwhile, South Carolina kind of gets an easier path to start the series, to start SEC play. But I just think that South Carolina is a more complete team. I just don't see A&M, especially having to play every single West opponent. I don't see A&M putting up the win total that South Carolina is going to put up. Especially just South Carolina's strength is their pitching, and pitching wins you games in the SEC. And South Carolina's offense has been productive. I don't know if you can look at A&M and be like, okay, their offense and pitching are to the level of South Carolina's.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing, that we really have to take this year as separate. And I know a lot of Aggie fans are like, oh, we started so last year and then figured it out. But I mean, this team is completely different. And they do, like I said, they do play every SEC West opponent, but again, they do get to play Mississippi State and Auburn. So, and maybe what's left of the Ole Miss carcass if the injuries continue. But all right, last thing too before we jump into picks. I think Chandler got frozen again.
What do you
Golden
think of
Spike.
A&M this year?
I think that they don't ever put it all together. I think that when one guy hits, the other guy can't see anything and strikes out. Their pitching staff has been, I wouldn't say suspect, but it's been streaky, I would say. So there's guys like Sadejo who come in and get everybody out that they face and strike them all out. And then somebody else on the back end will blow it. So they really haven't put it together as a complete team. And again, I don't think you want to figure out your lineup between the clear favorite in the SEC West, the defending SEC East champion, and the defending national champion. I think those are 3 horrible teams to try and figure out who you are. And the SEC kind of didn't do them any favors. But again, like 12 of the 14 teams in the SEC are really good. So you really can't complain about scheduling. Chandler, who do you think wins more SEC series, Ole Miss or Mississippi State?
Right now, and I still think the Rebs win more. I mean, State's pitching has been so bad during certain parts of the year, just the complete inability or just not wanting to throw strikes, whatever it may be. The freshmen are kind of coming alive, and that may make that better. But I mean, you're not going to win SEC series on freshmen alone. You're going to have your older guys step in and win some. And honestly, I mean, I think the freshmen for Ole Miss, as far as the pitching goes, are kind of the ones who need to step up. And I think the more experience they have in the SEC, the more they'll get there. I mean, you have 2 freshman starters who are really coming into their own already, and it's the bullpen. You can kind of get that same confidence. I think they're really going to win a lot of games. And I think the bats are just cold right now. Maybe up in Tennessee, and they'll come back and get back on track. But got to get the bats back on track, and got to learn some, figure out some pitching. But I just really think that the mound issues for Mississippi State are too deeply seated to recover and win a lot of SEC series. Now, I think they'll win some, but I don't think they'll win the majority of the SEC series.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of people are going to come at me for this comment I'm about to say, but I mean, when I would say Durangelo is more of a sideshow, and when he's your Friday night guy, I really don't think that that's anything to pat yourself on the back for. I mean, if you look at some of the guys that State's run out there as their Friday guy, Ginn, Plinkington, are you really going to put Durangelo at like a month and a half into his college tenure as your ace? I think that kind of speaks volumes to, I would say, I don't want to come after Lemonis because he's a national championship winning coach, but that does really speak volumes to him from a recruiting standpoint, that he understood he had pitching problems last year, and then it's a lot more of the same this year. And it's weird to see. honestly, some of the talent hitting wise that's being wasted at Mississippi State right now, with Hines and Callum Clark in a little bit, just because their pitching staff can't seem to get outs. AJ, would you kind of say more of the same, that Ole Miss wins more games than Mississippi State, or do you think State
Yeah,
kind of bounces back?
I think Ole Miss is just set up better to win, especially if Hunter Elliott can come back and be himself, or even 80% of himself throughout SEC play, in a month. Um, but it's a little harsh calling Durangelo a sideshow. But
Okay,
I
so in the grand scheme of things, would like from what State has had as their Friday guy when they were going to regionals, I would say that there's a huge drop off between Durangelo and MLB ready draft picks that just kind of are buying time until the draft.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with, but I think it's one of those things where Lamonis is just having to put his best arm, who's pitching the best in the Friday night role, because his veteran arms are letting him down. When you throw 40% strikes, you're not going to win a game. I don't care who you're facing. It's unreal how the veteran guys haven't been able to contribute on the mound, and so he's leaning on a bunch of freshmen, and the freshmen are holding up pretty well. It's their first obvious season of college baseball, but the veterans need to step it up and find the strike zone. You got the stuff, just throw it in the tiny box that's the strike zone. You can do it.
Which is easier said than done, but again, I don't really know what's happened from a locker room standpoint with Mississippi State, but it seems like a lot of the older guys that were there for that national championship really don't have, I wouldn't say the drive because I don't see what they do working out, but I mean, Jake Mangum was like a dog, and these guys really just kind of don't seem to have it. But
Something's missing. Something's
yeah, I
missing.
mean, they don't have, and I think that this is a big problem with A&M too, is they don't have the one guy that they can look to and say, okay, we're down one run, we got Jake Mangum coming up, like we're gonna get on base here and win the game. And I think that that's a big problem for State, is because they've had that. Honestly, I would say since like this is gonna show my age a little bit, but like Hunter Renfroe. So for the last 10 years, they've had guys that have walked in and been major league at bat guys that have been the face of the program, and they really haven't had that.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument that Hunter Hines is one of those dudes, but he's also, I think, the only dude.
Yeah,
Like,
and
like I don't think there's anyone else in that lineup right now who you look at and you're like, this guy scares me. I'm gonna pitch around him. Then, you can afford to face Hunter Hines and throw him fastballs when the pitching staff's going to give up 7, 8 runs a game. You can challenge them. You
And
can't. Yeah, it's frustrating to watch.
and that's something else that's really crazy too. Is it feels like that lineup has the potential to have 4 or 5 guys that are like that. I mean, in one given weekend, you may have a different guy that's not Hunter Hines, put up some crazy numbers. The freshman this past weekend, Heifel, and hit 3 home runs in a game. They have those guys in spurts, but if you can't put it together and have Hines, Heifel, and 2 or 3 other guys in the same night that are going to scare somebody, you're right. I mean, you may as well put Hines on base and pitch to the next guy. That's the only person you got to be scared of.
they kind of remind me of a very, very shitty version of LSU last year with Jacob Berry and Dylan Cruz, because those were big league guys, and I feel like that's how Mississippi State is. Like if you're looking at this from like a coaching standpoint, you're like, okay, we have Hunter Hines and we have a few other guys. Like, what do we need to upgrade? Like from a pieces paper standpoint, they should be a lot better than they are. It's just they've kind of not put it all together, or they've had guys take, I wouldn't say steps back, but not progressing in their career like Kellen Clark. But I mean, Ledbetter, Chance, Hancock, Larry, Clark. Like if you've seen some of the lineups that State rolls out, like this is not one. Honestly, this is gonna be a forgotten lineup. In 5 years, you could maybe name 2 people off this one. All right, but we're going to go ahead and jump into the picks. We are going to have legacy picks for Noah and Alex, but Chandler, we'll start with you every single time just because I didn't get a chance to put you in the graphic. But first one, Virginia, NC State. I believe Virginia took the series, but I'll go ahead and get those notes up.
Yes, they did.
They did. Chandler, were you kind of expecting this from NC State or a little bit surprised?
Yeah, no, I mean NC State has been kind of that fringe top 25 team this year, and Virginia's been consistently hovering around the top 10. And I knew NC State would battle a little bit, and the fact they got blown out yesterday kind of surprised me more than Virginia taking the series. So no, I definitely saw Virginia taking this one, but I didn't think it would be as lopsided, especially in game two as it was, or game two as it was.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and jump in too. I honestly I thought NC State was a little bit fool's gold. Anytime you lose your best player, I don't think that's a recipe for success. And I didn't think that Virginia was gonna sweep, but it's really really looking like that. And Noah and Alex were obviously on Virginia as well. AJ, reason you're on Virginia?
Again, I just think Virginia's a more complete team than NC State, and even if NC State can salvage a game, they were very close to winning game one. It was a competitive game, 2-1, but I think we kind of saw the difference in the team yesterday, where Virginia can roll out an arm that can still shove, and then the offense comes alive. And NC State really doesn't have the depth right now to do that on either front.
And then the next series, we have Florida and Alabama. This one has concluded with Florida taking 2 of 3. Chandler, are you a little bit surprised that Alabama was even to salvage one? Did you think that they were going to come out and prove it? What did you kind of expect going into this series?
Well, I mean, I definitely lean Florida, but I'm not shocked that Alabama salvaged one. I really thought it'd be a pretty close series, and for the most part, it was. I mean, obviously with the big walk off there, and in game two, Bama had every chance to win the series. I mean, they win that game, and the third game still stays the same, and they win the series. And so it was definitely closer than I thought it would be. I thought Bama would have a chance to play well, but they surprised me. They really did. I mean, Florida's a really good ball club this year, and to come in and come as close as you did to winning a series down in Gainesville, that speaks a lot for Alabama.
Yeah, and more the same for me. I was really impressed with what Alabama was able to roll out there. I would say outside of LSU and Arkansas, they have been one of the more impressive teams in the West, and I think that they're going to give a lot of teams fits. But again, I think Florida more than anything just proved how much of a beast they are, and that they almost are kind of slotting in to be. I don't think they'll be as good as Tennessee last year, but I could very easily see them running away with it in the East. AJ, what'd you kind of see in this series?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, in a series where, one team wins the series and the other team loses it, but I think this was a very good showing for both teams. Florida, we saw them fight back. We saw them, when their pitching doesn't go the way it has gone early, they're able to fight back. And then Alabama, to hit around two pitchers who really haven't been hit around this year. They beat Waldrop, and they pushed Caglione out of the game fairly early on. I think that offense is real, and I think Florida is real.
And then we'll go ahead and go to the next one. Florida, Gulf Coast, and Liberty. I am going to have to actually pull this one up to see, because I know Liberty, I think, won today or last night.
But Liberty did win last night. I think that was the first game.
Chandler, how much have you been following Liberty and Florida Gulf Coast? Were you kind of surprised by this one? Who did you kind of have in the series?
Liberty, I've gotten to see a good bit, and I know they're a good ball club. I mean, I know they've been, kind of in and around the top 25 for us. We've kind of had them on the fringe right there. Florida Gulf Coast kind of came out of nowhere for me last weekend with the big series win. And so I thought maybe it was jumping the gun just a little bit. A lot of people going really high on Florida Gulf Coast. I mean, because it was just a weekend. They're a good ball club, but I had Liberty going into this one, and I really think they're going to go ahead and pull out the game two here and take it. And maybe game three goes differently, but I really think Liberty takes the first two.
And I do kind of apologize for box score watching here, but Liberty was up 8-0, and then Florida Gulf Coast had a 7-run eighth to kind of make it a little bit more reasonable. But I thought Florida Gulf Coast was going to come out and play a little bit better than they did yesterday. I think that this is obviously a team that has aspirations to be back in a tournament that they haven't been in 6 years. So I think that they have the pieces there, but again, Liberty is a really, really good ball club. I mean, they've given a lot of the top teams fits over the few years. AJ, you also went with Florida Gulf Coast.
I did not. If you refer back to my team's picked, I picked Liberty.
Sorry about that.
So I want that officially on the record.
Go ahead and fix that.
But yeah, my mindset was very similar to Chandler. I think FGU or FGCU, good team, but I think they kind of, got out over their skis a little bit. I think, D1 baseball has them 20th. I think that's kind of an overreaction. And I think Liberty is, set up in a good spot to kind of catch Florida Gulf Coast riding too high.
One other note before we jump on to the next game, the announced attendance. AJ, what do you think it was for Florida Gulf Coast Liberty?
I'm going to go 822.
Chandler?
I'm going to go 465.
315. That is abysmally low for a top 25 team. And the ranking for Florida Gulf Coast did kind of leave me a little bit puzzled because I don't think Florida State was ranked. And if they were very, very low. So it wasn't like they went out and beat like a top 10 team. Everybody immediately overreacted to it. And then the next series, the battle of, I would say, Cowboys, but I guess Texas Tech is officially Red Raiders. Texas Tech versus Oklahoma State. Chandler, you said you're really familiar with Oklahoma State. Did you see them taking the series? And do you think they bounced back for games 2 and 3?
Yeah, no, I had the pokes on this one. I was, definitely surprised at how well Texas Tech played yesterday and the grit to finish that one off with the walk-off. Now, obviously, that grit was definitely helped out by the lack of catching a baseball, which Arkansas fans can definitely relate to. But no, I think Oklahoma State does bounce back and back in the series. I do expect all 3 games to be close. But I mean, you got to finish it when you have the chance, and that's just part of the game. It's not.
Did we lose Chandler again?
Yeah, couldn't have put it better myself though. You got to finish the opportunities you have, and when you have a 6-run lead in the 8th, you got to lock that up. I think it's going to be a very, very close series. It was hard to pick because I'm such a Texas Tech fan, but I just, this was kind of where my head trumped my heart a little bit, and if I get burnt by it, then I'm not going to be happy about it. But I'll be happy for Texas Tech.
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking the same thing. It seems like once a year, Texas Tech will just pull all of their magic and pull it together. And unfortunately for Oklahoma State, I think this is kind of the series that Texas Tech is pulling all their magic. Usually they save it for Texas, so maybe Texas will go out and beat them. But again, I think that this is more the same, where these 2 teams in TCU are going to be the big matchups in the Big 12, so you have to win them when you have a chance. Next slide, we have Texas State and Southern Miss. I believe we were all very, very high on Texas State. Chandler, you're kind of the Ole Miss guy and, an alumni of Southern Miss. Did you have them in this against Texas State?
Yeah, I mean, Southern Miss they've been struggling to put it all together in every game. They may hit the ball really well one game and pitch the ball really well the next. But Southern Miss is still a really good ball club. They've fallen to the back end of the top 25. I think they may have fallen out one week. And not that Texas State's not a great ball club, and it is at Texas State. But Southern Miss, I mean, they're about to show the Sun Belt why they were afraid to play in the CUSA, but weren't afraid to go to the Sun Belt because they are a really good ball club. And honestly, probably at least the next year or two, going to be a little bit too good for the Sun Belt. They're going to win the series. I think they go ahead and win it today, and it might even sweep on Sunday.
The game is in San Marcos, and I think that was going to be something that I was really looking at just because it was such an electric atmosphere against TCU. I thought Texas State was going to have a little bit better hitting game. I know that they've been tearing the absolute cover off the ball these last few weeks, and I thought that the hitting was going to outlast, I would say, the Southern Miss pitching. But credit to Tanner Hall, 5 1/3, 2 hits, no runs on 89 pitches. Really kind of blew the game open, I would say, a little early. getting one in the second, two in the third. But I think Texas State bounces back. I think that as Southern Miss gets into more of their bullpen and the strength of Texas State's hitting kind of comes through, I have Texas State going 2-3. AJ, you were the only one on Southern Miss in the original group, still standing by that?
Oh, absolutely. I counted on a Tanner Hall win game one. I just think it's a perfect recipe of people looking at, Texas State kind of coming into their own, Southern Miss struggling. Plus that San Marcos atmosphere can eat people alive, and kind of saw everyone going with Texas State, and it was, one of those not so fast, my friends. Um, Southern Miss is still a very, very, very good ball club. There was a reason that they're been in the top 25 for most, if not all of this year. They,
And let's. Oh, excuse me.
yeah, they can pitch, they can hit, they can hold their own against very good teams. I'm rocking with the Golden Eagles.
Now let's take a second to appreciate what could have been for Southern Miss, because I kind of lost pretty much all of my appreciation from Southern Miss last year whenever I made some choice comments during the postseason. But I mean, if they don't lose some key pieces to the portal, because they really didn't lose much at all to graduation or the draft. If they don't lose some of those key pieces to the portal, this is a veteran ball club that's currently in the top 10. I mean, they would be an absolute force. So the fact that Southern Miss is still battling the way they are, and I expect them to win the Sun Belt. Look for them to do big things, especially if they go ahead and get this opening weekend win here against Texas State.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll blow it against some SEC team that has to go there as a 2 or 3, if I'm being honest with you, like they always do, Chandler. But I think that they are kind of in contention to host, just because they always seem to find these fringe, I wouldn't say fringe, but these mid-majors to kind of boost up. So I could definitely see Southern Miss, and especially the way that they played against Texas State. I could see them dominating the Sun Belt. We'll go into the next one. Miami versus Virginia Tech. Miami took game one, but Virginia Tech was very close. Chandler, why don't you give us your thoughts who you have between Miami and Virginia Tech?
Well, I kind of started the show off talking about Florida. I never like to see the Florida teams do well, because I'm 100% with the boss man Noah on this one. The state of Florida, generally speaking, are a bunch of frauds. Get them out of here. They're always overrated. The fact that they came in and took game one really upset me, because I have Virginia Tech in this one, and I really think that I hope Virginia Tech goes in and back into the series, and they definitely have the guys to do it. But they kind of had a that's baseball day yesterday, and Miami's not a bad club. I just don't think they're going to be consistently able to compete with teams like Virginia Tech.
AJ, you are on the U here. Any particular reason why?
Again, I kind of like just picking the teams that, it's a bounce back week for Miami. They're unranked in D1's poll. And a lot of people look at that and go, okay, Virginia Tech, they are a good team. Virginia Tech is a good baseball team. Do not get me wrong, but Miami's no slouch either. And, they have one of the best closers, if not the best closer in baseball. And they didn't even have to use him yesterday, just due to the nature of the game. So they got him sitting out there for either game 2 or game 3 to hold it down late. The offense for Miami is dynamic. I truly, truly think that a sweep. I was very close to tweeting out Miami sweeps Virginia Tech, but I think they lock it up today.
I could see that. Virginia Tech sits at 1-3 in the ACC after their loss to Boston College. I think that they win today with Hack, just because I'm honestly baffled that he's not in the Friday spot the way he's pitched. So I could see that. And then Sunday, anything can happen. I'm not saying Virginia Tech will come back and win 2 of 3, but I don't think they get swept today. But again, this is definitely not the Virginia Tech team of last year. And, through the first 2 weeks of the season, I would say that they're one of the more disappointing teams in my eyes. And then I believe this is the last one that has already been decided. We had the Ole Miss Sharks or whatever versus Vandy. I really liked Vandy. I got to see them in person. I love what I've seen from RJ Schreck. the Duke transfer. And another thing too is Vandy is a very exciting team to watch for as much as they're a buttoned up kind of team. They really play the game very well. I mean, they went honestly crazier for a sack bunt than they did a home run, and that's what I really like out of Vandy. And I honestly I could see Ole Miss being frauds. I thought that this was a fraud series for them. But Chandler, I know you kind of touched on it, but do you think Ole Miss is frauds, like they're the new state, or do you think that they bounce back?
No, I mean, I think they bounce back. And I've been pretty vocal this year about the team proving people wrong, and I think that they're going to continue to do that. I was definitely shocked to lose the series, especially in two straight games. And again, I mean, a lot of that has to do with the management of the pitching staff. I mean, we have a shallow bullpen, so coaches feel like we have to kind of, run guys late. The starters run them late, and that winds up getting us in a lot of trouble because if you look back at the Thursday game, yeah, it was a walk off, run rule, but that game was not that out of hand until right at the very end. I mean, it was a close game for pretty much the entire game, and then got out of hand late. I really think that they go ahead and the Revs come back tonight and get that, kind of get that rubber or get that, takeaway win and come back and do well going forward. They have Florida at home next weekend, so I think we'll really learn a lot. If they lose that series at home, it could definitely be a long season for the Revs.
AJ, me and you were on the Vandy train here, so we'll go ahead and take our free win.
Our victory
Um,
lap.
Yeah, just talk about how great Vandy is. Going into the series, why did you kind of pick Vandy over Ole Miss?
I mean, I kind of looking at it in terms of I like to pick Vanderbilt series based off of who they are playing, and not necessarily even how Vanderbilt is playing. If Vanderbilt's playing a team that they kind of overlook, then I'll usually pick it against Vanderbilt. But if starting SEC play, playing the defending national champs, I guarantee you Vanderbilt was as locked in for this series as they have been for any all year. And when a Tim Corbin coached team gets locked in, for me, it's a no-brainer in terms of winning the series.
Yeah, and I mean Tim Corbin's, I would say, one of the Mount Rushmore people currently of the sport, and yeah, it's very tough to doubt him in a series where he gets bulletin board material. Um, Before we kind of jet here, AJ, what's the game you're most excited for today?
I'm biased. The doubleheader between two of the best offenses in baseball, Georgia and South Carolina. Like you mentioned earlier, Georgia has two of the top hitters average-wise. They're top 5 in the country in home runs. South Carolina, up until yesterday, basically because Florida got an entire series in before South Carolina could even start their SEC series. Up until yesterday, South Carolina was leading the country in home runs. And so I think that's going to be an explosive series. Plus, you got some great arms as well. Jaden Woods for Georgia has been, he is lights out stuff. But Liam Sullivan, their number 2 guy, their Saturday guy who'll be going to game 2 today, has been dominant. So I think that matched up with Will Sanders and Noah Hall going today will be extremely entertaining to watch.
Yeah, I was gonna say those double headers are always really tough, and especially when you have two teams that love to bang the ball around the yard. I mean, that's just a recipe for success. Chandler, what's kind of the game outside of Ole Miss Vandy that you're gonna have your eye on?
We've got a few that I'm really interested to see today. Tennessee, how do they bounce back? I mean, we've talked a lot today about Florida being the team in the East, but I mean, it's going to be tough to rule Tennessee out until they prove us wrong on that. So Tennessee needs to bounce back today. A&M, I mean, we know they're not going to be, number 1 all year in the West. They got to, prove they're even competing in the West. But to do that, I think having a good showing today against LSU and not getting shut out is going to be important. And then Oklahoma State, you can't take a lot away from them for getting walked off the way they did. But if they get beat 2 more times or even 1 more time this weekend, it definitely doesn't look good for them. So how do the Pokes bounce back? They go ahead and get a win or 2 down there in Lubbock. And I mean, that's going to be really important for them. So those are 3 that are going to be really fun for me this weekend.
Yeah, no, I would say mine are Auburn and Arkansas, outside of obviously A&M LSU that I've already talked about. But that one was a really intriguing one to me because Arkansas, I mean, it's 2 teams that I think have had complete opposite seasons. Arkansas has had a few bad losses and a couple injuries, and everybody's kind of gone, oh, DVH is a great coach. They'll figure it out. They're really good. And then Auburn, on the flip side of that, is, yeah, Auburn's really bad. They lose series because they're bad. So I really wanted Auburn to come in and kind of see where they sit in the SEC. Because again, Arkansas, despite all the injuries, everybody's given them the benefit of the doubt. The other one that's really kind of caught my eye too is Rutgers Mercer. I know Rutgers hasn't really been the team that they haven't really honestly been competitive, but Mercer they went and beat Baylor. They played really competitive against Texas. That was a series that really jumped out to me. And then lastly, I'm sure that for that 300 fan attendance game, I'm sure that there will be even less here. North Dakota State, Houston Christian. Both teams had one win each coming into the series. So they got a doubleheader today and then a Sunday game. So one of these teams is going to double their win total from before coming in. So that's the one that I will not be watching, but I'll be box score watching. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, I think we're gonna. It seemed like a lot of weather rolled through the country yesterday that delayed some games, but I think we're gonna get a full slate of games today that will. If you have some time during March Madness, if a team's blown out late and you don't feel like watching that game conclude, there'll be a lot of great college baseball on.
Chandler?
Yeah, no, for sure. Just to touch on, on that point, put on Fast Break on maybe on your phone, and then watch some college baseball. You can split 4 screens at one time, and there's going to be plenty to watch today. So, looking forward to a full day of the Saturday slate.
I believe that that's all we have time for. This has been the Weekend Rotation with Jake McKeever, AJ Sessions, and special guest Chandler. Use code CBC15 at Home Field Apparel. Go ahead, get you some. I'm sure when Texas wins the national championship in basketball, they'll come out with some great gear there. So use code CBC15. But signing off, have some great games. See everybody next week. We're going to have the Wednesday show. We're going to have the Monday A&M breakdown, and as well the articles. So be sure to be following us on Twitter. But see everybody later.
Go Cox.